Hi, welcome back to Silence is Cancelled. I'm here with Jacqui Mack-Harris, and today we have a really interesting conversation planned for you and for me in particular. Today we want to talk about mental health in the African American community. And just a few minutes ago, as Jacqui and I were sort of making sure that that's where we wanted to go, I just said, I have to say, I can't speak to it very much for obvious reasons, right? Right. So, but I think admitting to that is a good place to start. And, because there's a myriad of things I don't know in the world, right? And I think being willing to just, I'm not toting myself up here. I'm just saying, I think the first step is to say, I actually don't know. And but I think you do know. I think you have a few.
I do know a little bit.
I think a little bit.
Thoughts.
So where do we start? How can I begin to start understanding what is going on in mental health in the African American community?
Okay, so I want to start with maybe throwing a question at you. Why do you think that it's important for you, particularly, to understand mental health in the Black community?
Well, I would say the first aspect for me would be just I don't know if it's first. There are many aspects. Let me just say, one is just it comes out of a pure understanding of something I don't know anything about. And, here, there's this whole culture in my own country that I don't know enough about. And I find that sad. And I find it just kind of weird. Yeah. And part of that stems from, I think, having traveled around and been in many cultures and many countries and seen, especially, for instance, so my wife is from Kenya and I lived there for a while. And so, but there they have, and you might think, oh, Kenyan is a Kenyan is a Kenyan. No, there's like so many tribes and tongues but they're all known and they all have an understanding of like each other's culture and of each other's language. And I feel like we don't have that, even not just from white to Black, but to Native American, to Asian American. I feel like there's just a general lack of knowledge about what it means to be, and not that it's a singular thing, just as in saying a white American is not a singular thing, right? There's many factors to that.
Right.
So I find myself wanting to know my country better, especially having lived outside of it. I lived outside of it for the last many years. And so then watching the police brutality, watching that unfold overseas and asking myself, I don't know that version of my country.
Well, and I think that's good. I love that answer. It's about other human beings that we're in community with, even if we're not in direct community with. I think it is important to care about other cultures. And so I wanted to know what your reason was, because I had a sense that it's because you care about people and we matter. And just because we're not the same culture doesn't mean that we don't care about how things are going in that culture. Until we start to care about other cultures, we won't do anything to stop all of the horrible things that are happening in the different cultures.
Exactly.
Whether that's looking at women's rights or whether that's looking at racial inequality. In terms of mental health in the Black community, I think we do have some extra challenges above our other countrymen in terms of our history in this country. And so part of, I think, the mental health struggle for Black Americans is that there is a sense that we don't get to not be good, right? We don't get to not be okay. We don't get to not meet the standard, because we've been conditioned over the years to expect people to expect more from us, or to expect less from us. And so our job is to prove them wrong by being more than they imagine we could ever be, right? So walking into a space and having a conversation with someone and having them say, oh my gosh, you're so articulate. Hearing those types of things, which seems like a compliment, right? But it's not a compliment, right? Or just the surprise someone has about the level of your achievement. And so I think part of the Black experience that impacts our mental health that we don't talk about, we don't talk about mental health very much, period. We're just told we pray and we read scripture and we keep it at home. We don't air our dirty laundry. And I think that that's true for many cultures. I know for the Black American experience, we are not allowed to let other people see us doing badly. Although we see things on TV all the time, and there's this term called toxic Blackness. And it comes from just this focus of being on the negative aspects of the Black experience. And so that's impacting the mental health of the culture, because there is a expectation of failure. There are the microaggressions that are dealt with on a daily basis. And then there's a lack of access to getting the ongoing preventative help that one could get, whether that's in school systems or in the medical field or neighborhood resources like rec centers and things like that. There is just a lot of lack in our community, and also I think in our way of thinking about how we take care of ourselves.
And I guess you've been involved in the sort of Southern California or Southern LA community forever. 50 years. Yeah. I'm not, hey, you said it, not me. I know I can't go there, right? And you have kind of a very unique perspective, I think, both as a daughter of that region, and then as somebody who left it to go military, and I've seen other places and lived in Europe for a while, and then back. So having lived, through that time and through, from my eyes, some pretty troubling circumstances. I mean, every white guy thinks of Rodney King, and but it obviously goes way deeper than that. That's just what I know. Right. I can only go from what I know. Right. So coming out of all of that, and I was so young when that happened, by the way, but I remember it as clear as day. So where we land today in 2020, what are some of the main sort of issues that you see that are still surfacing, that have been there forever? And what is sort of being done to help those stigmas or those blockades?
Well, one of the things is something one of my old students calls hood PTSD. And so there's this trauma experience that you have from just living in what was South Central LA when I was growing up. It's called South LA now. There's an expectation of danger. There's an expectation that you can't trust law enforcement. There's an expectation that you can't be a certain way in certain neighborhoods. And so that creates a hyper awareness, right? So we're hyper vigilant, trying to avoid certain things. And certainly I left home, joined the military to get out of my mom's house, joined it to get out of my neighborhood, left home, experienced an completely different life, and then came back to California and still didn't go back to LA. Moved to, further south to Orange County and raised my kids in Orange County on purpose because I didn't want them to experience what I experienced growing up, which is the gang life, the fighting on the way home from school, the drugs were rampant, alcohol, all the things, violence in most people's homes. And so I didn't want that for my kids. So I moved them to Orange County, and guess what? Police brutality happens there too. So fast forward 2020 and seeing what happened with George Floyd be broadcast live or be broadcast just let me know that we hadn't come as far as people were trying to convince us that we had. We had a Black president. So apparently America doesn't have a problem with racism or police brutality. All those things have been overcome. And that was just a good wake up call for me and a reminder that things haven't really changed. The power differential still exists. Last year we had white men stormed the Capitol building with, and I'm talking about last year, not even January 6th, but last year they stormed Michigan, threatened to kidnap the governor, and they all got to go home and have dinner that night. Whereas, a kid's driving in his car who, I don't know, did he have expired tags? I don't know what was going on, but he died. He got pulled over and died. He didn't threaten to kill the governor, but he died. And people will say, well, he shouldn't have run or he shouldn't have had whatever. Put PTSD, people. Your nervous system doesn't see a badge and think, oh, I should comply. They're going to protect me, when that's not the history you have. Your nervous system says you're in danger, run, fight, hide, right? And so that's what typically happens. But people don't talk about the Black experience from that perspective. It's usually of what the victim who was murdered by the police did wrong, like in George Floyd's case, having possibly a counterfeit $20 bill. Like that, those God things forbid. Are what's traumatic. The fact, right? The fact that possibly having a $20 bill that is counterfeit can cause a Black man to lose his life, but a white man can threaten to kidnap the governor, storm the Capitol, stand in the face of police officers threatening them and spitting in their face and go home. This man over here with possible $20 bill dies. That's traumatizing. And to see that on a continual basis makes it hard for people who are still in those environments, in those neighborhoods, to see a way out, to have any hope. And it makes it hard for those of us who don't still reside in those neighborhoods to have faith in the justice system to make a difference. So that means that we have to find ways to go back and pull our people up and out and find ways to protect our communities from, unfortunately, those who are supposed to protect and serve us. And so maybe that's through changing laws. Maybe we need to get more involved in politics. Maybe we start a nonprofit organization that goes out and talks to people about mental health. But we have to find ways to protect ourselves and to start to heal from the trauma of just living in the hood.
So for those who are, maybe listening to this, who are in the middle of that trauma and who are in the middle of that living environment, who maybe don't see any other way out, who are still sort of, and we've not gotten deep into this, but, still taking all these behavior modification things to make sure that they're okay, things that they would not, things that I don't need to do, and which I would think, at least on some level, provides a lot of, is like a sort of a separate, this is a bit a high thinking, but is a bit separation of your authentic self, because you're pretending all day long to be something else. But
we call it code switching.
That's a much easier thing to say than code switching. So then how does somebody who is in that place, what are some tools they can utilize that can help them thrive or survive in that? I don't know what the right term is, to be honest.
Right. Well, I think that survival is an instinct that we just have from generations of having to stay alive through intolerable circumstances. And so I say, someone stayed alive through the Middle Passage so that I could be here. Someone stayed alive through slavery and all of that brutality and torture that experience was. And someone survived Jim Crow and so on so that I can be here. So I know we are resilient as people. And so we have to draw on our resiliency, and we need to remind each other of that resiliency. So I think one of the tools is just that those of us who are older start to speak life over our community, over our kids, over our friends and family members' kids, that we speak life instead of death. I don't care what the world thinks about that Black young man walking down the street with his pants sagging around his butt and a hoodie on. I don't care. He is still a human being who deserves every opportunity and who has every right to walk down the street in his hoodie, right? Without someone assuming something negative about him. And so that we stop being fearful of our own kids, that we stop expecting less of our own kids, that we stop putting them in the box that society has put them in and holding them there. We're those, that's far gone days where we had to say, you got to make sure that you stay in your place. Otherwise, master's going to whip you. Well, your place is whatever place you step into, whatever space you step into, and do the work to belong there, right? So if you want to go to college, you do the work, you belong there. You have got the experience and the education and the know-how to do a particular job or activity, you have every right to that. And so that we can just start to speak that over our children. Yes, you can be what you want to be. And yes, you can be anything you want to be if you have the capacity to do that thing. Do you have the talent? Do you have the skill? Do you have the drive? Do you have the motivation? Do you have the desire? Let's start to speak to our children in affirmative ways so that they can see themselves as more instead of seeing themselves as less or toxic or ratchet or ghetto or limited. And, you can be ratchet and ghetto and then you can go and be corporate. That's fine. But don't limit yourself to one way of living life if that is confining you and keeping you from succeeding. And I don't even necessarily believe that people have to move out of the neighborhood. I have some friends who just really love living in the culture and stay. But let's bring back the good, right? We go out and we get great careers and education, and we start to establish our own family wealth. Let's start to pour some of that back into our own communities. And while doing that, let's build some relationships. To be healthier mentally means to be healthier relationally. And if we can start to work on forming relationships with people, we have a better chance of helping them heal, helping them change their lives. You can't get somebody to make changes to their life who doesn't know you. They're just going to say, you don't know me, you don't know my life. So take some time to get to know them, rather than just walking in. Because sometimes we do that when we are missionaries and we go to other countries. We take our beliefs, our European American ideals of what Christianity and good and right is, and we take it to some other country, and we don't bother to find out what the norms are in that country. We just come and say, here's what you need to do. Yeah. Well, if we look back at American history, we can see that hasn't ever worked. Yeah. It's a bad plan. And so we need to stop trying to erase other people's culture and install ours. And that's even in our own communities. And so it's okay to have culture. And I think part of the mental health, poor mental health of Black Americans is the poor mental health of white Americans. And the white American population's refusal of accepting culture as a real thing. And so I'm often talking to my white students about exploring their culture and cherishing it and finding pride in their culture and knowing who they are and where they came from, who their ancestors are. My hope is that if white people get to a place where they're okay with their own culture, they'll stop trying to erase others, because that erasure, that silencing, is what is destroying people's mental health, because you're living incongruently.
Yeah, and I don't want to draw, a equal comparison by any stretch of the imagination, but something you said sort of sparked an idea in me, or sort of made some sort of connections. You said, how, some of these struggles are the same, like we share the same struggles. They look different, but they're there. I think everybody struggles with, at least on some level. Some obviously are more susceptible, some are less, but on this idea of appearance, and I want to look like I fit into this culture, this business culture, or this relaxed coffee guy shoulder, or look, or whatever. And I know as even as a white guy, there's like certain whiteness that I don't want to appear to ever have, right? I don't want to ever appear like, this sort of stereotypical like racist skinhead, which can be really challenging because right?
Yes.
Right. But there's this stereotype from when I was younger that like racist white guys would shave their heads or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, well, I just don't have any hair. So there's whatever.
Right. It's not
but it's like,
same,
okay,
right?
But I don't want to look like that guy.
Right.
And that's different. But I think that I think that the more that we accept the fact that there's so much, like there is more similar than there is different. Those differences are stark. Those differences are important. But we have a lot that we can share, I think.
Well, and here's the thing. There is more similar than different. Slave masters divided us. Right. So at a point in history, there were white slaves and black slaves working the fields. Well, if you got more of them than there are of you, you got to come up with a strategy. So, hey, white man, you're better than the black man because you're more like us. So we're going to make you the bosses. And so now you're like the foreman over these people who you were just in the field working with. So that difference, that separation, that was done to us on purpose. We're humans. And so you're not wanting someone to see you because you're bald and white as a racist skinhead is similar to, Trayvon Martin not wanting someone to think of him as a gangbanger and someone breaking into people's houses. So the desire is the same. It's just the way that society then deals with you versus Trayvon. And that has been done on purpose by the leaders of the country from the beginning. And we have to decide as the people in the country that that's not how we believe. That's not what we believe. That's not how we want to treat each other. Yes, there are differences in that as a white man, you have some privileges that a black man doesn't have just simply because you're white, right? Like you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt, even if you do look like a racist skinhead. And even if there was just some hate crime committed and you're walking down that street, you're probably not going to be the guy they pull over. However, if there was some damage to some property and some black dude is walking down the street, that is exactly who the cops are going to pull over. So that's where the difference is. It's not in the problem. Our problems are the same. It's the way in which our problems are responded to in this country that's different. And that shows our structural racism. Yes,
which I believe is a fact, and I see no room for debate in that argument. I don't understand how people debate it, but hey, for me, the most people that I know, because I know a lot of people who say it's not true. They live in white bubbles within the American culture, and they have not experienced or lived anywhere near, or I guess don't even pay attention to anything going on outside of their bubble. And I think that's one of the problems of not just them, but of all of us, right? So they're doing something that is very American and just staying right where I am. Nothing else outside matters. This is the only perspective I need. This is the only world I need. Nothing else exists or matters or whatever. And that's just a very damaging, I think, way to approach life. I know, because I grew up in that bubble and I felt very uncomfortable, and I busted it wide open and like, there's like, not enough room in here. This is because suddenly it just dawned on me when I traveled somewhere, and I was like, oh, like the whole world doesn't look like what I thought. The whole world can be different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's different. So
I like that too. Not better, not worse, just different. And unfortunately, I mean,
some places are worse.
In my experience. Right. But people are just people. And unfortunately, the leaders and founders of America made decisions that some people were better than other people based on the color of their skin. And it boggles my mind that we still function under that stupidity. Right? We still function under this idea that somebody is a better person because of the color of their skin, rather than
who they are.
Rather than who they are.
Yeah. It is mind-boggling to me as well. So essentially, to sort of take this away, if you're in that space as an African American, and community is going to be key. Yeah, that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, community is key. Community, and also get to know some people who are where you want to be.
Yeah.
Instead of hiding in the community. And, one of the problems is we tell our kids that they can't. So also the community leaders need to start doing more to positively influence our children, so that they do have a sense of, oh my gosh, I can do this. We believe in them. So let's tell them more about what they can do and less about what they can't do. They know what they can't do. They know it's hard for them.
Yeah.
Let's tell them that even though it's hard, they can learn how. And
there's this saying that I think is true regardless of who you are, but and it's not 100%, but I think it's fairly accurate. But it's something like, if you take your 5 closest friends, or the 5 things you pay most attention to, and that's what your life is going to reflect. And so if your closest people and the things you're paying most attention to aren't where you're going, then you're not seeing any examples as to how to get there. So that's why, it's important to, I think, focus on, leaders and people who have done what it is you're trying to do. You're not going to follow their path exactly, but you're going to catch small little things that will get you along the way.
Absolutely. And that's what changed the trajectory of my life, is the interactions that I had throughout my life with people who worked in my community, bosses that I've had over the years, teachers that I've had over the years, family, friends, uncles and aunts from other states. Just having someone speak into my life that wasn't living in my house or in my neighborhood let me know that there was more. And I always knew that I didn't fit. I've always kind of been that kid that didn't fit wherever I was. I can make it work, but I've always been kind of restless. And so for me, that launched me forward. And then joining the military, and you then see things you had never even imagined existed. And so we need to bring more of the outside world back into our neighborhoods.
So as a young girl, who would you say was the most, or who is an interesting influencer to you as you were growing up to sort of see that my life in this context doesn't have to stay like this? Who would that be?
That would be, I have an aunt who I watched start a business and become, have a doctorate degree. And then I have an uncle who would always tell me I was beautiful and always tell me I was smart. And he's a educator and an administrator. And so I think that when I think about the direction my life has taken with me becoming a professor and getting a doctorate degree, I look at the fact that both of them did that thing and they came out of our family, but also they were always encouraging me. And then the most important influence was my mom. My mother would always say, I don't have any dumb children. If I did, I wouldn't push you, but I know you're not dumb. So no matter what anybody outside of that house said, I couldn't be dumb. And so if I struggled with something that was hard, it wasn't because it was dumb. It's because I didn't have the answer yet. And my mom provided me with resources. My mom and my stepdad bought me dictionaries and World Book encyclopedias. If I had questions, they got me the tools to get the answers. And I think that was really helpful. And that's what we have to do for our kids. We have to make sure they have the tools and the resources to get to the places that they are intended to go.
Yeah, that's really good. I think this was a good conversation. I hope it was helpful for those listening or watching. And one of the things that we keep saying at the end of our podcast is you matter. And I think that's a great takeaway specifically for this conversation, because I think that's what's lacking in even the view of our police, the view of our laws, the view of is this person matters, and I should be slow in my, destruction of them, and in my just assumption of what they're doing. I should give them that same benefit that I would give, and I don't think that's easy. I don't think that's an easy change. Because it's so ingrained, right? But
it's an automatic response for some people, and these would be people who would not consider themselves racist.
Yeah.
In a conversation, they wouldn't say that they had anything against Black people, but if there's a Black man with a backpack on riding down their street on a bike, they're more likely to call the police because they don't recognize him than they would if that man were white. And when that is brought to their attention, it's usually pretty startling.
Yeah, it's pretty startling. But from us to you, you matter. And so
you matter.
And so if you have people in your life like moms and aunties and other influences who are helping you sort of see the larger picture, just reach out to them and let them know that they matter. And I think that would be a good thing you could do today. So very good. All right. Thank you, Jacqui. And thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Sid.
And we will talk to you next time.